Ladies and gentlemen, Game 8 is back at it again with more information beyond the 5 new Sonata sets that are going to be releasing in 2.0, and that's actually going to be all of the different Nightmare Echoes and the effects that they're going to have in combat. And so what you're going to notice firsthand from these Nightmare Echoes is that they're very similar to the existing ones that are clearly already in the game, right? Things like the Mephis, the Inferno Rider, Aix, Heron, Gorilla, Crownless, and of course the Thundering Mephis. And what you have to keep in mind is that these are going to have very similar Sonata sets, right, compared to what already exists in the game. And so that kind of news that the sets were going to be like different Sonatas, not actually the case. You're going to be able to keep your Void Thunder, keep your Molten Rift, keep all of these different sets, and just add these new echoes in the 4 slot on top of it all. And so with that in mind, not a lot of grinding you're going to have to do to fully utilize these sets. You're really just going to have to get one more piece, and then obviously the substats to go with it. And we all know how easy 4 costs are to farm relative to stuff, you know, especially like 3 costs. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and let's get right on into it. And we're going to be comparing, right, all of these new echoes to what already exists in the game and kind of highlight where they're stronger, why they're stronger, and maybe why you want to make that switch and actually start that grinding in the first place. The first one up is going to be the Tempest Mephis. The Tempest Mephis currently in the game is a lot more focused on a buff to heavy attack damage and electro damage as well. After the claw hit, you have to go through the entire animation to do it, but it's a lot shorter, right, than things like the Thundering Mephis. So this is kind of like the option that most people use in game currently. It's not the best, especially because it deals almost no damage at all. And so when comparing this to what we're seeing here, you can transform into the Mephis and then deal electrical damage to nearby enemies. And the second effect, which is quite possibly the most important part, is that when it's equipped in the main slot or the active slot, the Echo skill slot, it straight up just increases your own electrical damage and then resonance skill damage. From what we're seeing in here, it doesn't look like you actually need to activate the ability at all to get the buffs. It is a passive bonus. And that is really, really, really important when you consider how a lot of people simply don't use Echo skills or choose not to use some of the Echo skills because of the long animation time that they can have. So right off of the bat, it seems like the applicable users aren't really as great as it might appear, right? Especially if you're using Void Thunder. Because Yinlin, while she can be slotted in on the Void Thunder set, she's kind of like the only person. Yinlin and Yanwu are kind of like the only people that might want to use this. She doesn't have very much buffing ability. But what you're also going to notice is that this Echo, ladies and gentlemen, also comes in the coordinated attack set. The one that buffs your team whenever you crit with coordinated attacks and also gives a boost to the coordinated attacks as well. And so this Echo for Yinlin is going to be potentially one of her best options. But you have to keep in mind that this is not going to provide any buffs to the team. This is going to be a very selfish buff. And so if there is a 4-cost Echo, right, in this slot for the coordinated attacks that also buffs the team, this might not actually be the one that you want to use on Yinlin. And so this to me kind of seems like a bit of a, I wouldn't really prioritize this Echo very much because, well, you're going to be buffing Yinlin's personal damage, but you're going to be reducing her buffing ability to other members of the team. And especially if you're using her in the Zhang Liao team, where, you know, she's providing him a shit ton of buffs on Moonlit Clouds currently, might not be the best option. Nightmare Flame Knight of the Wilderness, Inferno Rider. These names in JP are actually... Flame Knight of the Wilderness is a little bit cooler than Inferno Rider, if I'm frankly being honest. And so what this is going to do is obviously deal some damage to enemies in the front, and while it's in your main slot, your Inferno damage or your fusion damage and your resonance skill damage are going to be increased, and then you can press and hold it to turn into the motorcycle, much like the original Echo. When you compare this to what's currently in the game, specifically for this character, this is going to be a straight up improvement in pretty much every single way possible. Based off of the fact that A, this Echo is just bad because it takes so long to activate. It feels so absurdly clunky to use. You have to land the 3rd hit for it to do anything at all, and it takes a while to get to the 3rd hit. It's really easy to actually cancel the move before you can swap it because it just feels bad. And the kicker, the real kicker of it, is the fact that this Echo buffs basic attack damage, which really only works for Encore. This Echo is so bad on Chang Li, but you're simply just slotting her on it so you can activate the Molten Rift effect. Because Chang Li, ladies and gentlemen, does not really deal basic attack damage. You can try to make her deal basic attack damage, but she really is not that good with it. With this Echo set dealing a majority of damage through resonance skill or buffing that just from equipping it, you remove all of that clunkiness from her rotations and you make her a lot easier to play, and you give her a lot more damage potential because it's actually a buff that she can use. If you're a Chang Li main, all 10 of you out there, this is going to be a really high priority Echo to farm, and it's also also very usable on Encore as well, because she does a ton of resonance skill damage additionally. Shisha is also going to be a great user of it, because like we've seen throughout her kit, she gains a lot of buffs from resonance skill damage, and that's how she activates a majority of her inherent skills. She's also going to be a great option for this. And so there are going to be at least 3 characters who benefit very heavily from this, and are, based off the fact that the buffs are permanent and simply work right off the get-go without any need for activation. This is going to be really high priority for a lot of characters. Aix over here is just going to deal spectral damage whenever it's cast. When enemies have a debuff called the Noisy Light Effect, which I assume is just going to be the spectral-related debuff that some characters are going to be able to apply, the damage dealt by this echo is going to increase. And then when it's equipped in the main slot for echoes, it's just going to increase your spectral damage without buffing any damage type in particular. And so this might be an echo skill that deals a lot of damage, and it might be something that you want to put into a lot of your rotations, but the fact that it isn't specializing in any sort of damage in particular might mean that it just gives less buffs relative to other characters. When you compare it to the Aix that's currently in the game, the non-nightmare version, that version of the Aix activates immediately after transformation. So it's very beneficial for transformation related echoes. You can simply activate them, immediately either swap cancel or immediately just dodge cancel out of it, and then gain its full buff to spectral damage and resonance liberation damage. However, this is not really a great buff that any character uses particularly well. Spectra Rover could be considered a good user of it, but they're not really like a big damage dealer in the first place. And so you can definitely steal clear content with them as like a main DPS or a sub DPS, but if they're performing either of those roles, there are simply just better options right off the get-go. Jinsei uses Jue, and so if this somehow ends up being stronger than Jue, we'll see. But in this situation, right, it also looks like this might not even be a Sonata set that applies to Celestial Light in the first place. This is actually the new Sonata set that's coming out in version 2.0. And so the comparison here really doesn't matter too much, because the Aix can't even be used with this Sonata set, and this is the new one that's launching in 2.0, which focuses on the Noisy Light effect. So keep that in mind. You're gonna have to use the new set to actually make use of this echo, and we're not exactly sure how powerful the new set is going to be in the first place. The Heartless Heron, the Nightmare Impermanence Heron, and this one's gonna be focused on the new Havoc set as well. The one that buffs Havoc damage as the 2-piece, but then also buffs the incoming Resonator after you use your outro skill, buffs their Havoc damage as well. This Echo set is going to focus a lot on increasing your own Havoc damage and heavy attack damage when slotted in the 4 slot. And so for characters who really want to use this, right, the only one in particular that I can think of that exists on the current roster is good old Dan Jin. Because ladies and gentlemen, her Chaos Cleave, right, is a heavy attack, and that's where basically 90% of her damage is from. And when you combine that with her ability to buff Havoc damage, this might be a way for Dan Jin, at least in Camellia teams, right, or maybe Havoc Rover teams as well, to close the gap between her performance and Sanhwa's in a lot of those lineups. This is obviously also going to be a great option for a character like Roshia, who, as we've clearly seen from the IGN gameplay footage, buffs Havoc damage. And I assume that based off of this effect, she's also going to deal some heavy attack damage as well. We'll see when she gets closer to release. Otherwise, if there's a different Havoc set, new Havoc set forecast that buffs Roshia's damage type, this might be tailor-made for Dan Jin. The existing Impermanence Heron is just really going to be more focused on the Moonlit Cloud set. So this is just a different set entirely. Not a lot of relation you're going to be able to draw here, much like the other Sonata sets that we've seen before. The Nightmare Ape. The Nightmare Wind Gorilla. What this looks like it's going to do is provide a continuous off-field damaging effect. I wonder if you're able to swap cancel this, because it might be cool to use this earlier on in your rotation. And when it's equipped in the main slot, it increases your arrow damage and heavy attack damage. What should be clear right off of the bat is that this is going to be pretty damn good on Jian, who currently uses the existing version of the Echo, which in all honesty already feels pretty good. I don't see a problem with the existing use of the Echo, where you simply do a quick swap cancel before Mortiphes or your sub DPS's Concerto is fully topped up. You can just swap cancel, you land the first hit, and then you immediately swap to other members of your team. The fact that this is a lot easier to use, however, will just make a lot of Jian's teams easier to use as well. And hopefully, this maybe deals a lot of additional off-field damage. You're obviously not going to be able to miss the kick anymore, which happens a lot in Jian's rotations if you're not using the move carefully, and can result in a massive DPS loss if you ever miss the kick. Because if you miss the kick, the follow-up strike that buffs arrow attack damage that we're seeing here, it simply does not happen. And obviously, you don't land the kick damage either. And so for Jian enjoyers, this might be the Echo for you to farm, and it should make a lot of his rotations a lot easier. And depending on how much this continuous damage does, it could also give him a lot of off-field potential too. So a lot of excitement here for this one. You can see here my forecast is okay, but it's got like 2/3 wasted substats. I'm excited to farm this one as a, Gion main myself. This is also on the Sierra Gale set, so you're going to be able to use the rest of your forecasts as well. It's not like the Aix or the Heron, which are on the version 2.0 sets. The Nightmare Undefeated or Crownless. This is going to be Camelia's best in slot because it buffs your Havoc damage and your normal attack, basic attack damage. Let me show you one of the big problems with Camelia's Echoes right now. If you slot her in on Crownless, what you're going to find is that you only gain the Havoc damage buff because she doesn't do resonant skill damage. And the only other option you have in the Havoc damage 4 slot is Dreamless, which provides no buffs at all. And so Crownless is quite literally the only Havoc damage buff you can get right now. And in her case, it's not even optimal because you don't get any benefit from the resonant skill damage buff. And so grinding out this, if you are a Camellia main, is going to be one of your #1 priorities because it buffs basic attack damage, Havoc damage, and simply activates just from being in the slot. You don't actually have to use it. And so you can use this as like a pseudo outro skill. You can use it in a lot of different ways. It's going to be really, really important for you to farm to maximize Camellia's potential because it's just going to be a straight up buff over everything that exists currently in the game. And now for the last one, and potentially the most exciting. Nightmare Cloud Flash Scale Thundering Mephis. And let me just say, the buffs that this one provides is absolutely amazing. It increases your own electrical damage, obviously your lightning damage, and also increases your resonance liberation damage. That's what I'm assuming from resonance release because they've used skill in all of the other languages. And so ladies and gentlemen, this Thundering Mephis Echo might finally be usable. This is what the Echo skill currently looks like. You only get the buff after landing that final attack. That cast time and the fact that it takes this long to actually activate the buff makes it one of the worst Echo skills in the game. And it also has kind of bad tracking as well. Sometimes it'll just completely miss the final attack. And so this Echo gives the same exact buffs that we're seeing here on the Nightmare Echo. And this is just recognition by the devs, right? That this Echo skill sucks balls. And they're basically just providing an alternative that gives the same exact buffs, but doesn't require the same clunkiness in activation. And so truly, this is a devs listened moment. These are the devs basically saying, well, we heard your complaints. We're just gonna make it better in pretty much every single way. And so Calcaro's gonna get better. Zhang Liao's gonna get a lot better. Holy crap. It's just gonna be a lot smoother to do his rotations. Void Thunder as a set still kind of sucks ass because you have to use a heavy attack. But hey, maybe there's gonna be some updates on that end to make the Void Thunder set a bit easier to activate. I would love to see if maybe this transformation counts as a heavy attack. Maybe that'll be something that happens. And so simply using the Echo skill and using the transformation will activate the heavy attack piece of Void Thunder. That'll be my only final ask for it, just so that we don't have to like force in these heavy attacks into the rotations when they don't feel good. That's going to be our overview of the new Nightmare Echoes and all of the great potential users of the set. I think I've gone over all the different options. Let me know if you think there's somebody that I missed, but there's a lot of excitement here when it comes to all the different options. For highest priorities, I would say it would be the Inferno Rider, the Nightmare Heron, depending on who you're trying to work with, the Great Gorilla Ape, if you like playing Gion, Nightmare Undefeated or Crownless if you enjoy playing Camellia, and the Thundering Mephis if you enjoy playing Zhang Liao. So there's basically an option for almost every single DPS in the game currently except for Jinxie, but Jinxie already has her best in slot Echo, her clear best in slot with Jue. So it looks like Kuro is listening once again and they're providing all those different options for characters and for players, right, who have been complaining about the clunkiness of some of the Echoes. Everything here is looking very, very, very good and very, very, very powerful. Let me know what you all think, and yeah, peace out. Very excited for 2.0.